Welcome to Going Green TV. This show is sponsored by the Chamber to promote environmental sustainability for future generations. Today my guest is Heather Adamson, and she's Principal Planner for AMBAG. And our topic will be the status of the Regional Sustainable Communities Strategy Metropolitan Transportation Plan, collectively referred to as Moving Forward Monterey Bay. Welcome to the show, Heather.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Heather has been Principal Planner with AMBAG for the last year, and she's had experience with large-scale, long-range transportation projects. And prior to AMBAG, you worked for 14 years in San Diego, right?
Correct.
And you worked on the first regional transportation plan that was as a result of SB 375 that requires communities to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions.
That's correct. I was project manager for that project.
Great. And you have a bachelor's in urban studies and planning from UC California in San Diego, and a master's in public administration from San Diego State. And you're from Santa Cruz.
I am from Santa Cruz.
Yeah. Well, I guess, the first question I'll have for you is the transportation and planning. What inspired you to get into that field? What drove your passion for transportation and planning?
Well, I guess growing up, I've always been fascinated with planning from all kinds of different factors. But once I got into school and was in the planning program, you can major or specialize in housing or land use or urban design or transportation or energy or anything related to planning. But I was really fascinated by transportation because it really does affect everyone's daily lives. Mm-hmm. Everyone at some point needs to go somewhere, whether it's to work or school or just daily activities. And so planning, especially long-term planning for these large-scale projects, was just something that I always found fascinating. So I just love doing it.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the California Air Resource Board and their mandate to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to, I think it's to zero increase by year 2010 or 2020?
2020, that's correct.
And then 5% reduction per capita by 2035.
That's correct.
So I think, and that along with AB 32, I think that is the underlying reasons that we have to figure out ways of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And to do this regional transportation plan, you're taking more of a holistic approach in the past by combining it with community strategies, sustainable community strategies, land use designation, encouraging transit for, with high density residential development and the like. Am I correct to say that?
That's correct.
Yeah. So, and also that once you adopt this plan, once it gets adopted by the supervisors, it has to be updated every 4 years.
Yes, so this is a living document. So it's something we work on with all the local jurisdictions, and it's something that once approved, we work on implementing the strategies and the projects in the plan. And then, of course, every 4 years we look at updating it.
Okay. So the mission then is first you identify areas sufficient to house a population, including all income groups, for the next 25 years. Mm-hmm. And then develop a regional transportation plan that fits the needs of the region and reduce greenhouse emissions from cars and light trucks. Okay. So that's kind of the mission statement in a nutshell. Let's talk about the procedure. How do you develop this plan, and how do you? I know there's public workshops and you go into partnership with the local cities and agencies. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the process.
Okay. So typically what we start with is we work with a wide variety of stakeholders, both technical and also members of the public. Because this is a long-range plan, we look out 25 years, and we look at where people are going to live, where people are going to work, where the new home's going to go. So we work fairly closely with all three counties, San Benito, Santa Cruz, and Monterey counties, and the 18 local jurisdictions within those counties to figure out what they have planned for their general plans or local city plans in terms of how they expect to grow, and then we sort of fuse that all together at the regional scale. And so that process sort of kicks off the planning effort, And so then we then move into establishing workshops to get the word out and to get public's feedback on what they want the region and particularly their community to look like in 25 years. So what's important to them, is walkability important to them? Is having public health, access to public health or access to education important to them? Or is having a job that they can walk to or diversified job base in their community so they don't have to travel 60 miles to go to a job? So we did a number of workshops to kick off that process. And then one of the key stakeholders that helped us with this is what we call our Regional Advisory Committee, and that's made up of members from a variety of avenues such as hospitality, planning, environment, habitat, open space, that really helped us sort of craft the planning effort and make it a more open and sustainable process.
I'm kind of curious. I've lived in the Monterey Bay Area for 28 years, and I've lived in Monterey, Santa Cruz, and San Benito County, and culturally they're completely different. So I was wondering, is there a lot of commonalities between the communities as far as what their vision are for the future, or are there big differences?
There are differences definitely between the three counties, and then of course there are things that we heard that are very similar. So access to education and access to jobs is something that we've heard in all three counties. Doesn't matter if you were in South County, Monterey, in Greenfield or Gonzales, or in Watsonville or downtown Santa Cruz. They wanted to make sure that there were better options or different options available to getting to where they need to go, so they don't need to take their car everywhere. Maybe they can walk for a shopping trip, or maybe they can ride their bike to school or something like that. And so those type of comments we heard throughout the entire three counties.
Curious. So everybody has the same
Yeah.
idea. Yeah, okay.
Similar to the general plan update process, when you start with a vision, and the vision is your 2035, right? What you see for our region. And I'd like to, talk a little bit about locally and what our concerns here are. The challenges: we have an aging infrastructure, limited resources, and in Hollister we also have seismic constraints. And I think that, we went through some hard knocks locally here when our county was the fastest growing county in California in the 90s, and then we built a lot of single-family detached homes, and then we had a little issue with a large issue with our
wastewater
infrastructure. Then we went through a moratorium, building moratorium. So, there are local challenges here. Also, with you mentioned, that the commonality here with the different cities and the regions are, job creation, having jobs in your environment in close proximity, so you don't have to get into a car and drive long distances. And also we have, some problems because we're still a bedroom community here locally.
Totally.
We have to get on our car, drive up Highway 25 to the industrial base in San Jose, and that's going to be going on for quite some time. So to look at what the mandates are, it makes the task seem somewhat monumental. I mean, to be able to have a plan that is effective in decreasing our greenhouse gas emissions with all the difficulty factors would seem to me is a major undertaking. So.
It is a major undertaking, but it's definitely something doable and definitely something that the region's been working towards. Whether it was, not called a sustainable community strategy, they have been looking at ways, whether if it was other ways such as electric vehicles or other ways to, make things better for, reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
Are there a lot of special interest groups trying to lobby their perspective, or is it pretty?
I haven't heard so much so far. Usually we get a lot of comments and interest. We try to engage people before as the plan's being developed to get their input going forward. So, from starting from the bottoms up, we have, hear all voices. Typically, we start to hear from people who haven't been involved so much in the past, or, have been waiting to be involved once the draft plan's released, and that's not scheduled until early 2014. So I expect we still will be engaging with them. But we have been trying to, engage with the Grower Shippers Association, agriculture areas, hospitality,
really
business
important.
and chambers. And so making sure that, we don't want to promote accessibility and mobility at the expense of the economic vitality of the region. So all are both important goals in developing this plan.
You know, and the experience here on this show, we've had Tony Ruiz, who we talked about new urbanism and form-based codes and, you know, integrating uses within the urban landscape. I think that, you know, even though, you know, in Hollister we have, you know, the Calaveras Fault goes right downtown through the city there, and we're trying to figure ways to convert vacancies in upper levels commercial buildings to maybe residential units without having to go through a lot of seismic issues and trenching and all that. But I think, and the step in the right direction is we're realizing that to reduce, in a planning standpoint locally here, to reduce our carbon footprint is to go back to the old traditional neighborhood concept where we, you know, we can go to a barber shop, walk to the library or a bookstore, go to a swing set or a playground area, put your kid on the swings, you know, get a cup of coffee. You know, this is like for a retired person, or, you know, if you're working, you can work and do these activities in the same, you know, area without having to get into your car and drive somewhere.
It amazed me. I wasn't born in Hollister, but I look at pictures from the 50s and 60s of downtown, and it was vital. I mean, there was all kinds of stores and stuff, so it pains me to go down there now because you can see the vitality in those old pictures. It'd be great to get that back. So,
Definitely.
yeah.
Well, when you said the 50s and 60s, I think it was right around that time. Isn't that the time when gas was cheap and land was
Yes,
cheap?
it was,
And you can
yeah.
say, wow, you know, I can get in my car and I can drive long distances, not have to pay that much for gas. And you know, I like to build a house way out here and these sticks out here. Why can't I do that? You know,
Sure.
infrastructure. What does infrastructure mean anyhow? I don't know what that means.
That's
You know,
true.
so I mean that was a condition of sprawl. So I mean, and also leapfrog development.
Yeah, that's
So
true. Yeah.
these are all, you know, the way the transportation plan and housing and land use and all that. I mean, all these are factors that have to be all considered into the development of the plan.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. So now, Heather, and I'm also a member of the Regional Advisory Committee. I have been participating in as much as I can. I did attend a workshop in Hollister where we had like 5 different scenarios, and we had a score sheet. The public came in there and looked at them and, you know, had their comments. Maybe you can just kind of give us a summary of the 5 scenarios and the hybrid scenarios that
and
are
how
coming
that
about.
worked
Yeah.
through the process, of course. Well, to start the sustainable community strategy, we went through this process called scenario planning, and it was the first time at the regional scale that we have done this as part of the development of our Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And so our first set of workshops that we held in May, we really asked people, what's important to you? What do you want your region to look like? What do you want your community to look like? You know, how do you get around? How would you like to be able to get around? And what kind of features would you like to see in the future? And so we had 6 workshops around the region and one in Hollister that you mentioned. And then we went back and developed 5 initial scenarios. And the 5 initial scenarios covered the gamut from focusing transportation investments and land use improvements in regional transit corridors, or focusing in on areas of community investment to make sure that you can walk and, you know, have complete streets that, you know, serve not just the vehicle but also bicyclists and pedestrians, and focused on local transit access. We also looked at scenarios that focused on diversifying the job base, particularly in some areas that maybe have one industry such as agriculture and, you know, needed, you know, a diversified job base to be more sustainable and to keep those people who live in their area working in the area as well. And just also looked at maintaining the existing system. And so we had these 5 initial scenarios that were very distinct in terms of their approach. And we had another set of workshops in July of this year and got feedback on those scenarios in terms of, you know, what did they like, what types of projects were in there that they would use, what types of projects weren't in there but they liked maybe certain components of it. And we also had a scorecard that looked at our goals for the planning effort, as well as measuring how well, you know, how in terms of congestion, in terms of travel time, in terms of being able to access a transit route, or, you know, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, how did each of the scenario perform? And so we took that information that we got from the public. We also did a number of online surveys during this time period for people who couldn't attend. They can provide feedback online. And we then combined those, took those 5 scenarios and created 2 hybrid approaches. One focused more on local street and road maintenance and sort of more existing land use plans and active transportation improvements. And another one focused more on the complete streets walkability with some mixed use improvements in there. We had another round of meetings with our key stakeholders and technical staff. And then last month, the AMBAG board selected a preferred scenario that was almost like a hybrid of the hybrids. So it does contain mixed use emphasis on areas where we are putting a lot of transit infrastructure. So in those more urban areas where the future rail lines or future express buses or heavy transit investments are going in, maybe not just focusing on commercial development, but also maybe just switching that up to more mixed use where people can live and work in those areas. And then it includes a number of transit improvements in there, as well as obviously maintenance. Our local street and roads and our highways are in disrepair, so making sure that's maintained, but also investments in local transit and walkability and complete streets and active transportation improvements. So,
are we looking at more compact, tighter knit development, with the commercial and residential in terms of mixed use? And if we are, how does that balance out with open space preservation and conservation? Have there been concerns about, I know there are concerns about open space. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. And as part of our planning effort, we need to visually represent and discuss the open space plans that have been going on in our region. And so that will be included in our plan. How many acres are planned for open space, will be maintained for open space, as well as another issue that we found out that's very important in this region is farmland. People don't see farmland and open space habitat as the same. So they want to make sure that we do preserve areas for farmland as well as open space. And so that's all being evaluated, and depending on how the initial scenarios, obviously some scenarios, depending on the growth pattern, did go into the open space and farmland more than others. And so we really looked at a preferred scenario that would kind of minimize that and put the more compact development where it was appropriate and where it would support the transit investment. And we worked very closely with the local jurisdictions from each of the 3 counties, and a lot of them are already pursuing these areas, revitalizing their downtowns or doing specific plans specifically on how to create those more urban pockets and then making sure the open space is preserved.
I know the county, San Bernardino, is updating, they're still in the process of updating their general plan, and as a city planning commissioner and working on the city plan, it's enough for us to coordinate what they're doing with their general plan with our general plan.
Sure.
Think of what Heather and AMBAG and Regional Advisory Committee are
Yeah,
doing.
I was wondering how do you do
coordinating
that?
all these.
21 potential general plan updates. It's a lot.
Yeah.
But we have been working really hard over the past year to form really good working relationships with our local jurisdiction staff. So if we know they're working on a general plan update, or like San Benito County is just about towards the end of their process, we want to make sure that we're consistent and we're working towards the same endpoint.
Yeah, because I know I've been Park and Recs. I've been kind of working with them. They're going to have the river trail from Tres Pinos to San Juan Bautista, hopefully, and hopefully that'll get a lot of people out of their cars. So little projects like that you need to be aware
definitely.
of. The water industry, like I was telling you before we got on the air here, that they're building a new water treatment plant on Union Road, so that's going to affect how you approach things. So it's so important to talk to all these different agencies. It's just I don't know where you can find the time and the coordination.
Yeah, during this process to date, I'd say over the last year we've had over 150 coordination meetings, either with a public group like the Regional Stakeholder or Advisory Committee, or with local jurisdictions on coordinating that.
So that's so important.
And getting all that information from diverse groups and then synthesizing it into some coherent, I guess, kind of a matrix or to find out where the strong statements are and on the scenarios, I think is pretty much paramount in the process. And you know, I like what you've done with your scenario scorecard and the policy goals, access and mobility, economic vitality, environment. You know, you're rating these from these scenarios based on these features and goals. Healthy communities, social equity. You know, system preservation and safety. You know, I do have strong feelings in my experience with as an architect where I had an office in Campbell, and I saw a state of urban decay develop in that situation, and I was one of the transplants from that urban situation down to Hollister because I couldn't afford anything for my family at that time. So the land that was available was in Hollister. So that's where we moved, and that was a situation of I thought it was kind of a symptom of people leaving the urban centers because of urban decay, of that situation that was back in the early 90s. And I think one of the things that I noted on scorecards is that in blighted areas, I think there has to be incentives to prevent that decay and to make sure that, you know, we can find ways of sustainability within you know, downtrodden urban centers, you know, maybe
Definitely. I'm all for
lowering
redevelopment.
development fees or something like that, redevelopment. No,
redevelopment's
we
the
don't
way to
have
go.
redevelopment,
Yeah,
so, you know,
it's hard. A
that's
lot of the
another-
things that we want to do in this plan and that we would like to implement as soon as we could comes back to funding, is
Right.
funding availability. Unfortunately, as part of this planning requirements, you have to work within your reasonably available funding in the life of the plan.
So how does that work, though? You come up with the preferred methodology or plan or whatever, and then do you throw that back to the local jurisdictions? Say, here it is, fund it.
Well, we go through all the available funding sources in there. This plan actually is just under $8 billion worth of investments
Wow.
over the 25 years. Obviously, we have a number of projects that aren't included in that, and so we include all the projects that we have funding for and, you know, identified in the plan, but then we also show the other projects that or programs that we would like to do if additional funding becomes available.
I see.
And so in terms of implementation of the plan, you know, the local jurisdictions have the local land use authority, so we want to work very closely with them to make sure that they are moving forward and implementing the land use that we assumed in the plan based on their input. The transportation agencies implement, and Caltrans implement the projects and build according to the time frame that they've given us. And of course, as things change or we make progress on them, we update this every 4 years. So we will continually, and our next plan will actually go out till 2040. So we'll continually look
Do you
forward.
actively set, like, let's say, you know, most of these municipalities work kind of in a vacuum, and so do you join people, like if Monterey is going to do a project that's going to benefit Salinas and vice versa, they work together collaboratively? Do you kind of join them together on
Yeah,
these
that's definitely done at the regional level,
Uh-huh.
and then it's done at the county level through the Transportation Commission. So for Monterey County as the transportation agency for Monterey County, for San Benito Council
Got
of
it,
Governments. And so they do a lot to bring jurisdictions together on local projects as well.
Yeah, because you worry about duplicity or
Yes.
one project taken away from another project.
Yeah,
so there's a lot
no,
of-
we
so
like
much
to know what
coordination.
everyone else is doing, and
Yeah.
so we can do this in a coordinated fashion.
Right.
Got it. All right.
Yeah. So the Board of Supervisors, they kind of went with a new kind of a hybrid scenario that was based on the two hybrid scenarios. So
Correct.
what is the next step in the process?
The next step,
EIR and
the AMBAG board approved the preferred scenario last month. We're now preparing the sustainable community strategy and the environmental document. That's scheduled to be released in February of next year. For a public review period of almost 2 months, we'll have another round of workshops to get feedback and comments, make any adjustments to the plan as needed, and then scheduled to adopt next June.
great. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for having
it's
me.
Quite a topic. We could go on for quite some time. There's a lot.
And I
lot
hope
to
you
be
come back
talked
in the
about.
future and give us some updates. And let us know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Maybe sometime in the next couple of years, tell what we're making progress on in terms of implementation.
That'd be great. But it's exciting just to think of the possibilities of it, So
Yeah,
I hope it
definitely.
comes into fruition. Yeah.
And I know AMBAG has a website. I was looking at it earlier today. So if you're interested to find out more about the moving forward, which is again, it's a Community Strategy Metropolitan Transportation Plan, you can go to their website. I'm not sure if just
Moving
Google
forward,
up
right?
AMBAG, you'll find it.
Movingforwardmb.org.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks again, and hope to see you soon for another update.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Hey, you're back watching Going Green, and Heather is going to stay here for next segment here, and because she's interested, I'm sure, about plug-in cars, right, Heather?
Of
Let me
course.
guess. Okay. Well, our Going Green reporter, Shawn Novack, went down to Santa Cruz last weekend, and you have a report on National Plug-in Day down there, right?
I do. This is usually David's deal, but he was on assignment that day, I'll say. I guess I'll say it. But I went over, it was in the Staff Alive parking lot, which is a natural food store over in Santa Cruz. And they do a real nice deal. They fill up the parking lot. They had about 8 or 9 plug-in vehicles. And they had all the way from the Tesla, which is like $80,000 vehicle. It was beautiful, and I was drooling over it. But they told me,
Model S, right?
yeah, they told me to back away, son.
Nice looking car.
But we did get to go. I did get to take a RAV, what is that? RAV4 with the electrical vehicle one, which that comes into the market at about $29,000.
When you say, did you test drive?
Yeah, I got to take it around the block.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, because you look like a race car driver. You know,
Well,
got
thank
that
you, but
little
they
goatee going on
didn't
there.
feel the same thing.
They
So,
didn't?
so anyway, 'cause
Oh,
I
after
tried it in
the
Tesla.
drive?
Yeah. But I mean, you can see that the battery technology is getting better. Of course, the Tesla had the longest range; it was like 200 miles. So that that would work for me. But most of the other cars were like the RAV4 was 100-mile range, and then they fell off from there.
Right.
So it makes a lot of sense for people that have they have 2-car family and one person works in town, do the short little trips with the electrical vehicle. But PG&E was there, and it was really interesting. They talk about how to get the plug right, so you can plug up at home, and you just charge it when you come home at night, plug it right in, it's ready for you the next day. So it was very impressive to see that, and of course they put some nice food out at Staff Alive too. So
Yeah.
thank you for having me go down there, and
Oh,
I brought some
absolutely.
pictures. Hopefully they're showing them on the background here.
Yes.
But I took the picture of the Tesla, of course, and then all the tents down there, and it was
Right.
a nice thing. They even had some electric segways, that-
Sierra Club down there?
Sierra Club was down there. I'm trying to think if there's any other groups like that. I don't remember, but there was several vendors there. So I think it's getting bigger as it goes on. So it's cool. You see a lot more electric cars over there than you do in our area. So I was like, all of a sudden my eyes were open to the electric cars. So I was really interested to see so many.
Okay, well, thanks for that report,
You're
Shawn.
welcome.
Hi, we're back watching Going Green, and hey, I just wanted to say that that's one heck of a show. And I think in the beginning when I say, we promote environmental sustainability for future generations, I ask you viewers, what do you see for our community for year 2035? And when I say environmental sustainability for future generations, I mean, we can elaborate on what that means. What I think is, diversity and harmony and a healthful environment that involves a holistic approach to looking at man and nature, and it depends on the maintenance of the natural world, I would think, but that's my take on it. What about you, Shawn?
Being the water conservation manager for the county, I always try to stress efficiency, because we're going to use resources no matter what we do. So if we can be as efficient with the use of those resources as possible, so we can stretch them out for future generation, that's the way to go. So that's hopefully the show gets some of those ideas across.
And Heather, do you have any final words for the viewers here on the vision for 2035?
I'd say we really need your help in implementing it. Can't do it alone, not one agency, not one city, so definitely it takes the entire region and all the public members to help us do that as well.
Thanks for watching Going Green, and we will see you next time.